qualcuno, viene detto che quell'impegno, quel voto che si va a fare, quell'impegno che si va a prendere, va a creare dentro di noi qualcosa di fisico che riesce a sostenere quell'attitudine, quel comportamento. E quando si rompe l'impegno, manca quel sostegno. E poi non si riesce a ammendare l'impegno, deve ricrearlo da capo. Ok? Quindi quando c'è un impegno fra due persone, su qualunque ambito...
So every time that there is a commitment among two people in every field, when a commitment is broken, then there is a magic that is broken, that it's not something there anymore, and then many other things happen like in a chain, and then one has to recreate a commitment from the beginning. And this is the first level. The second level of a correct sexual conduct is that in which the respect is lacking towards the will of the other person. So let's make an example. Inside of the first level, we're talking maybe inside of a marriage. But if a person takes sexual intercourse but the other person doesn't want that, or better even, the vow will be more precise in the lack of consideration in the desires and in the will of the other, which is more delicate, because wrong sexual conduct is that in which where the desires and the will of the other are not taken into consideration, and the other person is just like a mean for my own pleasure. And in modern terms, this is like a sort of abuse. This is just to say about sexual misconduct, and what do we mean by that? This is just to bring some clarity on this point. But the point is that Buddha transmitted a vision of world which I'm not going into because it's beautiful, but it's not something that I want to talk about tonight. Then conduct rules. And the first conduct rule that Buddha transmitted was ahimsa, non-violence. Then ahimsa, the term, started with Buddha, but then it became present. I cannot do something towards you, but if I am indifferent towards your suffering, is that a form of violence or not? I don't know if it ever happened to you that you were feeling bad and then you feel the indifference from others. Does it hurt or not? And this is in Malpensa. I was wondering where did my cards go, but I had no money and phone with me. I go look up and down, and I look around, and maybe we spend the whole day like this. I look for a phone, I call home because I remember the number of home, and I ask for the number of the other person which had the other card of the luggage. But to find someone that will allow me to make a phone call, I don't know if you have like a thief face, but I don't think I have it. I don't think it exists, actually. I was there, but what I understood is that when you're in the position of having to ask for help, then it's like, in general, people, there is like a sort of alarm, they really feel it, and there is like a total indifference. It took me 1.5 hours to make a phone call. I even asked the police. I asked people around, many people asked me, give me the number, I won't let you type it in, and then it was busy. And so they wanna wait because everyone is in a hurry. And for me, it was a huge lesson. And there was like a trivial difficulty. And to find when you're in difficulty the total indifference, that made me wonder, like about people on the street asking for help, maybe doesn't have food or whatever, most of the time we have an attitude of indifference. And so one of the first rules that of conduct the Buddha brought to feel well, to be well with others is non-violence in speech, in physical, and also with thought, up to coming to the non-indifference towards the other's suffering. And other than this, Buddha also transmitted some techniques, some tools that we can translate in modern terms in basically as a sane, healthy lifestyle. What are the things that I can do through my everyday life that help me to feel better? This compendium of vision of the word, rules of conduct and techniques to be well, starting from meditation, sacred art, diet, whatever, they were transmitted from generation to generation and held in an excellent way by many people. And this is what we call a lineage. A lineage is where a person receives a knowledge and puts it into practice and shares it with others. A spiritual tradition, in Buddhism we have many different traditions, is an ensemble of a vision of the world, rules of conduct and techniques of personal development. Every tradition, maybe they have like differences on the vision or on the rules of conduct or on the techniques, but Buddhism in general has its own core, which is shared by all traditions. And this gets to Tibet, like 1500 years ago. Our own tradition arrived in Tibet by Atisha in the beginning of the 11th century. And for all the subsequent centuries, the Tibetans had this incredible capacity of maintaining the tradition in a very coherent way without changing much. I don't know, in Italy, I've heard that. What do you say about people that live in the mountains? They have like a more open or closed head, mind. We would say that they are quite stubborn. That's what we mean in general. So can you imagine who was born at 4,000 meters and they were closed among them for many centuries? One of the qualities that the Tibetans were able to bring high was to keep this tradition in a coherent way without making many changes. In Tibetan society itself didn't change much across all these centuries, and in the past 50, 60 years, maybe a bit more, there were huge changes in Tibet and outside, and also in our society. Once I was in Thailand, in a monastery which is called the Monastery of Dhammakaya, where they have a huge facility. One of those years I had a tour of their facility, and at a certain point there were the offices of the people managing with the contacts for fundraising and partners, and they had like 4 million partners, registered partners, and I was with them with like 200,000 people doing a meditation. But the point is that they asked for many years. They asked me to teach them things about our own tradition, Vajrayana. And there will usually be like a group of 200 or 300 monks, senior monks. One of the years, the question that I was asked was, why is Tibetan Buddhism, why was it diffused much more in the Western culture rather than the Theravada tradition? Why is this according to you? And my answer, which I still believe, Theravada Buddhism in Thailand, Sri Lanka, because it's very stable there. When you need to send a master to Italy, who's going? The principal master, or the one that had finished the studies a while ago and needs to do some experience. Tibetan Buddhism in the 60s and in the 70s mainly, because there were refugees and because they needed to find where to put their roots again. The masters that got to us were the best, the creme. And I say to the ones of Dhammakaya, if you decide to send
io sono sicuro che in 2 giorni ci sarà una quantità enorme di persone che sarebbe lì a imparare, a voler fare, partecipare. Quindi noi abbiamo avuto questa fortuna.
So we had this luck that facing an unstable and difficult situation, because the masters were looking for where to put their roots, they tried in the West. They took like a long bridge and got here. It comes to my mind one of the first masters that came to Italy. They wrote like a book on Bardo, Dream, Geshe Jampel Senge. As he finished his studies in Tibet, he basically becomes like catapulted from the ancient Tibet to Rome in the start of the 60s. And it's really difficult for me to imagine. And it was like between Rome and Naples. I really have a hard time imagining what did he live and how was this change of culture. And once, another quick anecdote. I went to visit a very important master in Tibet. Like, was young but very influent, very important, and was very difficult also to find like a time to talk with him. Then I had like half an hour instead of 1 hour and a half, and he said something that really hit me. You know, people like me, my job is easy. Talking about himself, the masters of the past in Tibet, they already opened the ways for us. Everywhere we go, people treat us with respect. Whatever we say, even doesn't matter. Just because we are the Lama, they treat us with treat us with respect. But the real difficulty is for the ones that need to prove what they have to offer. So the real heroes of Buddhism are people like Lama Gangchen, he said. When Lama Gangchen came to Greece and he started giving teachings, he was mainly focusing on healing. And one technique that comes from our tradition is that of healing with the breath. And so he was breathing on people. And at the beginning, people were blowing back at him. And so he needed to prove something that was not there. But I believe that this is for any of us, and if there is, that it's not just because you're a Buddhist that you have trust. We need to experience and to try if it works for us or not. And so there were these people like Lama Gangchen and others that built this bridge. And today we find ourselves at this side of the bridge, and at the other side of the bridge there is still the tradition and philosophy of Buddhism. But making an analogy, it feels like an old man that has like a lot of stories to tell, a lot of experience, but also a lot of rigidity, because everything had been done in that way forever, and so we need to do it again. There isn't much energy, and on the other side of the bridge, there is us, and we are like children. And there is a bit like the joy of ignorance, of not knowing certain things, and the enthusiasm of wanting to know them, and that naive attitude of believing that you have already understood when you are just at the beginning. And so there are all these things that are in the pre-adolescence, but where there is like a different perspective and energy and also flexibility. So every time that I go in Tibet and I come back, I feel that I'm a bit in that place, and this gives me joy, because one of the things that it's important to do is not to take things for granted. So I'm happy to be here, and this year I told myself I don't want to repeat what I did last year. I told myself that I didn't want to travel, and actually the opposite happened, but let's see. So I would say that next year I want to travel a lot, maybe it has the opposite effect. Today I wanted to start from an important point that is called, there is a verse in Tibetan in a text called Gyulama. The text starts with, the disease is to be known, the causes. The causes of the disease are to be abandoned, and the state of health is to be reached, and the process of healing is to be taken. The medicine should be taken. It's very simple, very linear. We should know the disease, that is, I see the symptoms. Through the symptoms, I come to ask myself, there is something that's not right. But there is a difference between the symptoms and the disease. The symptom is the alarm that is ringing. The disease is the house that is burning. The headache is a symptom. The illness is like a problem in the liver or the neck or whatever. And so we should know the disease. I should know what does that symptom, what is that symptom related to. You should remember that symptoms are very important, because if there were no symptoms, we would already be dead. They are there to tell us that there is something wrong, but the problem is not the symptom. The symptom is the alarm, which is showing us that there is something wrong. Once we recognize what is the disease, and I feel the symptom, and I'm able to relate the symptom with something that is out of balance, and so I'm able to see where does that symptom come from. I need to take the next step, which is asking myself, what is it that generates that disease? Because nothing comes out of nowhere. And once I'm able to recognize the causes of the disease, then I need to abandon them. Once I've done this, and mainly, and I want to say uniquely, after doing this, and so after having seen the symptom, having recognized the illness, and having recognized the causes of the illness, and having abandoned them, at this point, then the state of health is to be reached, and this is fundamental. We can't just go against the disease. I need to go towards health. Where do I want to go? What do I want to reach? Once I have abandoned the causes of the disease and I want to direct myself towards the state of health, then there is the path to be taken. Is that clear? We have one thing that we do often, that is that of pointing at some things. We have our own experiences, and maybe we believe that our own experiences are only ours. I don't know how many people of you have ever felt a certain degree of anxiety. Many, no? Maybe we can ask the opposite. Is there someone that hasn't felt anxiety? Or we have maybe that inner sense of speed, of not having time. But if I have a symptom and I look at my left and also that person has a symptom and to my right and everywhere, then this means that there is like a shared illness. And so it means that also the causes of the disease are also shared. We are all doing something that is wrong. One of the problems, the most serious problems that I see in our times, and I see it both in what concerns health and also political choices and economical whatever, is our tendency of wanting to eliminate the symptoms without allowing ourselves the process of knowing the disease and the causes and going towards the state of health. Also, on a political scale, we have the tendency of pointing the finger and saying, okay, that is not wrong, okay, but where does that come from? Where do we want to go instead? Because let's remember that the solution is not in eliminating the darkness, but in bringing the light. We can't eliminate the illness. We need to cultivate and find back health, which are two different things. And it's like, it's very simple that it's very simple to stop war, but it's very difficult to build peace. And I talk also about the family, familiar environment. It's easy, quite easy to stop a conflict. Maybe everyone raises the voice and we say, okay, let's stop because if we don't want to destroy each other, let's not make war at each other.
Il momento giusto per prenderla nel modo in cui io ho il vantaggio. Ho fermato la guerra.
I have stopped the war, but between stopping to quarrel and finding actually a really harmonious state, there are totally different things. Peace requires harmony, requires respect, requires love, sharing, a sense of belonging, many things that are necessary. And to cultivate peace and to build peace is not something that you do immediately. It needs time and time. And where do we see wars today is because the conflicts were stopped, but peace was never built. Conflicts were there, but they stopped for one reason or the other because it was not convenient. And at a certain point tension builds up and then it explodes somewhere. But to cultivate peace is much more challenging, and also in family relationships, with friends, at work. To cultivate harmony you need much more energy, and in last analysis, no, but in the beginning, yes, you need much more rather than just allowing yourself to fight or to stop the fight. And so to go back, one of the problems that we have is that we have the tendency of not wanting to see the symptoms as symptoms, but to treat them as the disease. In other words, an aptitude of wanting to eliminate the symptoms without allowing oneself the process of understanding the disease and the causes of the disease, and to abandon the causes of the disease and to believe in a state of health and to try to reach it. So if at a certain point in my family, like there is a moment of tension, like that can happen, you know. There are there methods to stop tension. Let's try to do something that is pleasant together. Maybe we eat something that we like or whatever. For example, I have a couple of friends, and every time that there is like some tension between them, they do some sport together. Then once one of them couldn't do the sport anymore, then tensions scaled up. So yeah, there are methods to stop the symptoms, but if I don't go and see that this tension is a symptom of something that is out of balance, for example, in a relationship among two people, whatever, friends, family, for there to be harmony, there needs to be the subjective aspect of one or the other person, that each one of the two feels that is giving enough and is receiving enough. When I feel like that I am giving more than I'm receiving, or I'm receiving more than I am giving, so there's some tensions are building up there, and this could be a disease. And why is there a disease? Maybe there is like some expectation, an idealized image of the other, whatever. There are all the causes of this disease. Maybe like some practical situations. There are every kind of situation. But what is fundamental for us is to see, okay, there is a conflict, there is like a symptom, and what is out of balance, what is generating the lack of balance and that we need to abandon, and what kind of relationship would I want, like friendship or of trust, transparency, and what do I need to do to build that relationship, and so to take a path of healing. Are we there? The same things happens on an economic plane, also on a social level. On all levels, this path is valid. But even more, and this is interesting to see, how can I say, I try even more when it's something that it's more shared. And it's also interesting to see that even foolishness is to be shared. An interesting anecdote comes to my mind. I was in a monastery of Tashilumpo in Tibet. At a certain point, I was going around and I go back in a part where there are some golden roofs. And one time they were building, like mounting this golden roof, one of these golden roof. And a friend of mine told me in past it was really not auspicious that people would stay there and look at people mounting a golden roof, but because it was an happening that would happen just like once every 100 years, then everyone would just want to go to look. And so one of the challenges would be, okay, how can I make it so that people don't come here and look? And one of the responsible of this, like in 1920, okay, this person knew that on that certain day they needed to mount that roof, and in the early morning, he spreads a word and says, okay, in the mountain just behind there, in the time it took like 2 or 3 hours to walk, there is a dragon. And so he spreads word that there is a dragon, and because he was a respected person and known, what is saying? Wait, what? There is a dragon. Everyone tells the other, oh, there is a dragon there, and half of the city moved to see the dragon. In the meanwhile, they managed to mount the golden roof without too many people around. At the end of the day, people came back and they were happy, and they told them the story about the dragon. The day after, in he also goes there to see the dragon. He had doubts with himself whether there would be a dragon or not. He came up with a story, but because many people started believing in that. He started having doubts on himself about the story that he made up. And so this is about to say, when many people believe in something, then it's very easy to believe in that. In the same way, when many people try to ignore something, then it's also natural for us to ignore that. When many people have an unhealthy conduct that are unable to recognize as such, then it's also natural to maintain that unhealthy conduct and not to recognize it as such, even when direct experience says that it's not so. And this is the danger when a big number of people takes a contact that it's harmful. So let's do the following exercise. Let's start from the beginning, the symptom. It's described that when the mind is present in the present moment and the thoughts, this part of the mind that is discursive, that it's constantly looking back at the past and reliving and projecting on the future. When one is there in the present and this part is calmed down, then physically happens a state of harmony and synchrony across the head, the heart and the intestine. In other words, one feels well. When the mind gets into the discursive state and even more is projecting a threat, because the threat that we all live is predominantly mental. When I imagine that tomorrow this could happen or whatever, these are threats, they are just mental costs that we make up. In Tibetan we say shadows without form. But we live that ghost as something real. And so what happens to the body when we leave the threat or when we get into the discursive process of the mind, the heart and the intestine and the brain? They go out of sync. And even the left and the right sides of the brain go out of sync, bringing a lot of problems. Digestive, anxiety, problems of heart, that we see as very common. What is the force that it's pushing towards discursive mind? What is the force that pushes us towards projecting the future and of against being present in the present moment, because it seems more and more difficult? In Tibetan, according to Tibetan Buddhism, we say that the basis of that mind is what it's called in Tibetan gopa, which is like a mental agitation that comes from desire. I make a translation. This gopa is the feeling of empty, of being empty and wanting to feel that empty after having had a strong experience of pleasure, of dopaminic pleasure. In other words, when we feel pleasure, when that moment of strong pleasure finishes, we stay in a sort of ecstasy that slowly goes down, or just as the pleasure finishes, is there like a hole and the will to relive it? Which one? So chemically speaking, we experience dopamine, and the stronger is the experience of dopamine, the stronger also the fall that we have after the experience. So when we are in the fall, we start to kind of work inside what can I do? What do I have to do to leave that experience again and go back to that state? And there we have the discursive mind. Okay, maybe I do this, maybe I go there. And it's a bit like the example that I made many times, like going to a place where you eat very, very well. And for me, it was interesting because I understood how tricky it is. Nothing against eating something good. The problem is not eating something good. The problem is after having eaten that delicious thing, to go back, to stay in the search. How can I repeat that experience? To consume one life on that. Because like if I eat something good, then maybe it stops there. But no, I talk with the others. Okay, maybe we can go to the other place and get like really into a dynamic of threats, of worries, and I increase this discursive mind. For me, what I see is that we live in a time where there is a huge increase in this discursive mind, where there is a huge difficulty also of just being.
O mi sbaglio?
Is it?
Se abbiamo tutti questa
If we all have this challenge, and I've seen this difficulty in the East, in Tibet, in China, in India, in Nepal, in the monastery of India, I'm talking about the difficulty that is very spread. This problem of anxiety, of being present, is not something that is just about the Western world. It's about modern world. What do we have in common? Because let's take the path symptom, disease and the causes.
Dal mio punto di vista, quello che succede è
From my point of view, what happens is the symptom is anxiety, constant inner speed, decrease in creativity and in the capacity of analysis, of deepening things, decrease in empathy towards the other, and consequently in the capacity of seeing the other, more stress. Let's remember that stress is the response that the body gives towards a threat. Extremely important, the stress response. Because when we find ourselves in front of a threat, our system reacts to say the energy needs to be put there. You need to run. Maybe you run. I don't stay there and reflect on the correct view of reality, and at a certain point there is like a earthquake or a lion attacking me, and I say, lion, wait, I still am not there, maybe in a bit. Now I don't have energy to run because I'm reflecting on how impermanent phenomena and permanent, and in that moment energy needs to go in the legs. You just need to run. And so the cortisol increases, and we need that. But what happens is that from what I understood, like 90 seconds after that reaction of I need to run, or maybe I need to freeze or react, there is a part of our system that makes like a sort of reassessment.
Una rivalutazione che va a vedere c'è ancora la minaccia o no.
Is there still the threat or not? If there is no more threat, the lion went away, the earthquake has gone away, then my system starts to generate something to calm me down. So physically different things happen in the body to calm down the system. If the system believes there is still the threat, then you still give the alarm, and you still give the cortisol, and it goes on like that. When the threat is something physical, it's easier to understand, but when the threat is like a ghost, is there still the ghost? Yes, then you go on. Yeah, is it still there? Yes, you go on. Sometimes it's possible to stay in that alert state for years, and this becomes chronic stress.
Lo stress cronico
Chronic stress generates an inflammation, a chronic inflammation, because cortisol brings inflammation. And chronic inflammation is one of the main causes for tumors today, for cancer. And so the question that I ask myself, that I ask, by looking around and looking at myself, is there like, do we live in a context where there is chronic stress, anxiety, a feeling of always having to run, uh, difficulty of always being present? Do we share these symptoms? I have them, and for me it's not a taboo to talk about this. I have the luck on my side, and this is I have a good emotional balance. So many times that I already felt like a certain internal agitation, and I don't go projecting on something or the other. I am able to maintain my emotional balance, but I feel that thing, and I recognize very well when there is that or not. And by looking around, I see that there is very diffused thing. And so from here starts the question, where does it come from? That there is a problem is quite clear, right? Where does it come from? From my point of view, this reflection came to my mind by seeing the practice of self-healing on Buddha Amitabha, and so I was doing the practice and I got a bit stuck in Amitabha. There was Vairocana after that, but then I got stuck in Amitabha, and if we go and see in the practice of self-healing is explained, okay, the characteristics of Buddha Amitabha. Okay, I make for the first thing, if there is no satisfaction, there cannot be concentration. Without concentration, there cannot be correct discernment. Without correct discernment, there is no correct communication. So these four things, first we need satisfaction, because satisfaction is that state free from that internal agitation of wanting to look for something. Because when we experience pleasure and then we have a peak, we have that anxiety of having to feel that, and so the discursive mind starts. And satisfaction is that inner state of fullness. Because if we go and look on chemical terms, it's much more connected with serotonin and oxytocin. And it's interesting to see that dopamine that generates more anxiety comes from taking. And serotonin is more about giving, more about sharing. And oxytocin about seeing one with the other and to share by sharing what one feels. Okay, let's take a step back. Let's imagine like a moment of pleasure because you eat something good, or maybe because there is like a sexual pleasure, or because there is a pleasure of seeing something beautiful. Whatever sense of pleasure that's about something that you're getting, is that nice, like pleasurable, but what is the inner feeling? There is the pleasure, and then there is like a hole, a void. So imagine instead the sensation of pleasure when you're helping someone. There is a continuous there is a sensation of pleasure that continues. And then there is the third, which is the the sensation that you have in the sharing and in the loving and feeling loved. Are we able to differentiate these three? One of the big mistakes that we do is that we project the happiness on the first and we ignore or neglect the other two. Because also in the so-called love relationships, they are much more based on taking than giving or sharing in general. Taking is more about dopamine and it generates more anxiety. So what happens is that for me, in order to be able to stay in a state where I feel well, I need to cultivate satisfaction. If I don't have satisfaction, satisfaction we cultivate it with serotonin and oxytocin. And here there is also another chemical thing that the higher dopamine is, the lower serotonin is. And it's interesting to see that if serotonin we generate it by giving, the more one is attached to getting and obtaining, then the more selfish he is because he is more attached to dopamine. So satisfaction is not about having more, but it's more about sharing and giving value to what is there. Satisfaction is not obtained by obtaining the object of desire. Satisfaction is obtained by giving value on what one has, by not trying to have more and in giving thanks and by sharing. Because if I also give to you, that means that I feel like I have enough. And the inner feeling that we experience by sharing, giving love, trust, in the sense of belonging, is something that is very beautiful. And when there is this sense of satisfaction, the mind calms down. That inner state of dialogue slows down, and there is that feeling that maybe we feel like a sincere love towards someone, and we are able to have like a deep moment of sharing where we give and receive, and one really finally relaxes. I imagine that we all have lived this. When there is satisfaction, satisfaction allows much more easily to obtain concentration. One of the great difficulties to meditate is because we are lacking satisfaction. The more we are taken by the mind that it's unsatisfied and wants something else, that needs to repeat some pleasurable experience and dopamine, the more meditating is difficult, the more it's like a torture. Yes, you stay there in a seat and you have to observe the breath, but the more there is satisfaction, the more mind is also able to concentrate, and then we have the reins of our mind in our hands. This image comes to my mind to take the reins of a horse that doesn't want to be there. The last time that I rode a horse, this is an analogy that works for me. It was like my sister's horse. It was called Troy. Why? Because when my mother came to Brazil and my sister was in the airport, said that my uncle wants to give you a horse. My uncle had many horses, like a very beautiful, want to give a very beautiful horse. The only point is that then you have to pay for the expenses of maintaining it, and so my mother said that it's like a horse of Troy. But the point is that I was on this horse. When I was very little, I was riding a horse. I was with a skirt, which is also not the best thing to be on a horse. I had my uncle boots, which are like the 45, and I have the 42. The horse really couldn't wait for going back, and I remember the feeling of this trip on the horse, and it was like, okay, yeah, I managed to keep the horse, well, because I had experience, but then as I went down, I was shaking like my arms and everything because of the fatigue. And this is like trying to meditate with a very unsatisfied mind. And yes, you can do it, but then you need to hold the reins very strongly. But it's also very beautiful when the horse wants to go somewhere and you also want to go somewhere. There will be times where I was riding a horse and maybe I would just also even drop the reins. And when we get into a state of deep satisfaction, then it becomes much easier to direct the mind in a direction or the other. When there is satisfaction, there is concentration. And when there is concentration, there is the ability of going deeper. We get out of a superficial level of experience and there is more space for intuition. And when there is that, there is also better communication because I have a clarity about what I want to say. I have the capacity of seeing the other. But if we want to improve communication and discernment and to have more concentration, everything starts by having more satisfaction. And unfortunately, in the times that we live in and in the context that we live in order to be able to have more satisfaction, then we need to go through the phase of abstinence, because we are all addicted. And that is not a joke, and not an analogy even. But when the drug is something that we take sometimes, in a certain part of society, then it's easier to see that a person is addicted or that something is not wrong, that something is not right. But when the drug is present everywhere and that it's something that's accepted and in some cases even requested, then it becomes much more difficult. And what are we addicted of? I make a step back. What is the dynamic of drug addiction? Quick dopamine. This dynamic, something that easily puts us back in that state of pleasure. So when I have a state of pleasure that is extremely high and easy to obtain, then when it finishes, I want to repeat it. And we go back to the concept. We see it with small kids. There are 4 things that create dopamine: colors, sound, movement, and news.
Cosa abbiamo noi nei cellulari?
What do we have on our phones? Color, movement, sound, and mainly news. News generate pleasure. I don't know. Has it ever happened to you to look at a movie at a certain point and then to take it back? I know I've already seen this part, but if it was nice, then why don't you want to look at it again? But I see often this impatience towards something that I've already seen, because it doesn't generate the same state of pleasure. One is not interested in the movie, but in the state that one wants to generate. If I've already seen that, then it's not something new, it doesn't generate the same sense of pleasure. And so we live in a context where, in many different ways, like from the phone, the TV, the series, but mostly from screens, we use the screens as mostly not to communicate, not to learn, but to go and satisfy our addiction and to try to go back in a state of pleasure. I don't know if this is clear. For example, I heard of a doctor. She was specialized in helping some parents because she started seeing very young kids, like from 0 to 3 years old, and many of them were diagnosed with children with autism. They were crying constantly, they were unable to look in the eyes of no one and to interact with people. They didn't want to play, they weren't able to eat well, many problems, totally disconnected from the world around. And when this doctor saw this, she recognized that the symptoms that these children had, were the same symptoms of the people addicted by heroin. And what she realized is that the people, these children, were always on the screen. And so she took the screen away from them, and it was like a tragedy. But after 2 days, the children were starting to look back at each other. They were not autistic, they were simply in a state of pure chemical addiction, okay? So what happens to someone that is in a phase of formation of its own structure is a different effect, but this also happens to each one of us. Why am I talking about this? Because if there is no satisfaction, and it's not a conceptual satisfaction, it's much more deep, then there is no calmness, there is no concentration, and it's useless to speak about meditation. It's a bit like if I tell you, look, we need to drain the water in this room. Every one of us maybe has like a sponge. The water is mental discourse, and I give you a technique to dry mental discourse. But then you keep the taps open, and then it's normal that you come to tell me it's normal that it doesn't work. It's always wet. My sponge works very well. Yeah, of course it works if the taps are closed. So the disease needs to be known, the causes need to be abandoned. The state of health needs to be reached. So this is very, very important. Like, what kind of mental state do I want to have? What kind of life do I want to have? A life where I feel good with myself, not depending on the stimuli that I have around me. I want to have like a life where I sleep well. When we talk about symptoms, I also see 4 things that we have already talked about in the past. There are basic functions, and when we don't have those functions, then it means that there is something wrong at the basis. Let's leave a bit the Dharma philosophy, great tantric practices. Firstly, we need to sleep well, eat, shit, and to move. While one of these 4 things is not working well, we're not able to move because it hurts here and there, when we don't have appetite to eat, or we have appetite for the things that are not good for us, when we eat not well, when our digestive system is not working well, when we are not able to sleep well, then let's just leave the rest aside. Sorry if I say like that, and I'm not saying let's all go home. I'm just saying that we should take care of what is at the basis. And when I look around me, there is an increase on the problems with sleep or not. And even maybe the question, have you slept well? It seems like, wow, yes.
Non lo so. Non mi sbaglio? No? Però che cosa determina
But
una persona
what
che sia
determines a person that is healthy? Physical health. I'm talking about physical basic health. It's to have appetite when you need to eat, but not having appetite when it's not time to eat. So it's not like I have an appetite all day long. I eat, I have appetite for things that are good for me, and I'm able to digest them well. I have energy when I wake up in the morning. I want to sleep when it's in the evening, and this is like basic health, state of basic health. So if we start to have problems to sleep and digestive problems, the digestive part has a huge connection with the mental and emotional state. I heard a story the other day that made me reflect. Maybe it can be useful for you. This doctor said a patient comes to him, who's a gastroenterologist. The patient comes to him, and she already did all the possible things to eliminate cramps that she had at the stomach, done all possible exams, taken all sort of drugs, and so on. And at a certain point, she goes to this doctor and she says, "Look, all the exams that I've done, nothing is there. But it's a fact that every day I have this tension, these cramps at the stomach." And he asks her, after having seen all the exams, "Is there maybe some problem, big problem they have in the family, big tension is present?" "No, look, I'm well with my family, nothing is missing. I feel quite well, there is not really evident that is missing in my life." "No, but I'm not asking that. Is there maybe like some small tension that is repeating itself in a chronic way?" "Yes, my boss is terrible. That one is not a man," and she starts to talk bad about him every time that I see him, this and that. "Okay, this is your prescription," says doctor. "Yes, what do I need to do? Another endoscopy or no? You need to, okay, when you see your boss, you need to smile." "I can't." "When you see the boss, you need to smile. You try to do this for me." And she goes back 1 week later and she says, "Doctor, you don't know what happened. I've tried, but not only I was able to do that, the boss also changed. She wasn't the mean person of before and the pain went away. I don't know why." So if we haven't realized, body and mind are connected. And it's fundamental for us to see these dynamics, because the problems that we have of digestion, the problems that we have to sleep, all of this is connected with a state of anxiety, that is connected with dissatisfaction, that is connected with a lifestyle that is unhealthy. So what do I need to abandon? If my addiction would be like to sugar, I believe that we all have that, then how can I stop that addiction? I need to stop eating sugar, okay? Then once I'm able to do that, I can find like a balance a bit here and there, but until I haven't found that balance, I need to stop. So, what do we need to stop in this case? What is our addiction? A sentence that Lama Gangchen told me when I went to India and studied there. I had my laptop. It was a MacBook 520C, I remember. And at the beginning, I really loved the computer when I was a kid. I started when I was 6 years old, still with DOS. I don't know who remembers about DOS. It's one of the signs that I'm already a bit old. And I remember those where you need to write to install the games, save the points, slashes, and all these kind of things. Then when I was able to change the color of the screen was something beautiful, but other than this, I come with the computer in the monastery and Lama Gangchen knew how much I liked it. And he told me a sentence that worked very well with me. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't use the computer. And not going to give it rations to you. Okay, this day you can use it 1 hour, the other 2 hours. You should use it for what is useful. When you need it for something. Every time that I was finding myself in front of the computer, why am I taking it? Do I need to do it? Is it a mean or is it a mean in itself? And here I pose a challenge to you, the screen. To use a screen as a mean, as a tool, and not as an end. I need to send a message to a person. I take the phone and I write the message. I have a doubt about an argument. I call a friend to discuss about it, or I look on the internet maybe. If I can call the friend, it's also a nice thing, but my grandparents died this year and my grandma made them some years ago. It was very nice to stay with them because they talked much but never about life of others, about any argument. And when they would start to discuss about something, geography or history, and they wouldn't agree on it, my grandma would call her sister, and she was like a really egghead, and she was like a living encyclopedia. I met her when she was like more than 80 years old. We spent like an evening discussing quantum physics. My grandparent instead was looking on Google after having discussed for long. But if I need something, then I take that tool to do what I need to do. How many times in a day do I look to see if I've received messages or emails? 3? 4? That would already be enough. Let's maybe say 8. Obviously there will be a bit more, but let's try to decrease it. I come home and I don't know what to do, and I have the urge to look at something on the TV, I have interest in on something, and I want to look at the documentary, or do I simply need to be entertained? Maybe I take a book, I do some meditation, I listen to some music. We need to find ways in a real way, and not idealized, to diminish, to decrease the quantity of stimuli that we have. And if you do it well, one of the signs is that you will stop having signs of abstinence. That you will start having signs of abstinence, so you will have more anxiety, you will want to take that object, but you don't do it. The other day I went in a shop, I don't remember where, along the highway, and I hear the radio there, and there was a person in the show. I've done something really difficult, but it was very nice. I have been 3 hours with the phone turned off. Wow, let's try that. We can go out of our houses without phone. How can we do that? It's easy, you just leave it home. It's not like so difficult to do that. But we need courage. And so, one of the important steps for a person that has an addiction is to admit to have the addiction and wanting to not have it anymore. a person that is addicted to alcohol but doesn't admit to have alcohol to addiction, then it's very difficult. So the first question that I invite you to pose to yourselves: do I have an addiction or not with the screen? And I don't want to get into social media. Let's just talk about the screen. For example, me, I have never used social media, but I've realized that it's very easy to get into the dynamic of addiction with the news. It's quite enough to look at the news, to see the news like once every 2 or 3 days. So what I try to do is read like 4 or 5 things, 5 articles, and read them from top to bottom. But I saw this dynamic of wanting to scroll and to finish the site of BBC and wanted to finish the site of Al Jazeera. There is something new there. And I've seen that dynamic in me, and I needed to do some effort to not fall there. So we should ask ourselves, do I have an addiction or not? From the moment that I say yes, at that point I need to do something really. Do I want to keep having this addiction or not? There is also who says, I have addiction and I like it like that. But if you like it, okay, but if you realize that it's not good for you, then you should take the courage and take the challenge of using these tools as a tool and not as an end. I add one thing. Our being, both on a physical and mental level, has a characteristic that it's important from the process of human evolution, that in English is called use it or lose it. So if I stop raising an arm, slowly my system says, okay, that arm is not needed anymore, I put the energy somewhere else. So if there is a part of ourselves that we want to be strong, healthy, more developed, what is the technique to develop more? To use it. It's not that it gets consumed, rather the opposite. It gets consumed by not using it. We lose it. This happens also on a physical plane. That's why we need gyms, because we have taken this path of looking for tools to not having to do some physical fatigue. So for example, I don't need to go take the water and to collect wood and many things, and at the end we have this sedentary life where we don't have to move because we have found all the tools that do all the things for me. And so we need to run by standing on the place, or to lift weights, to lift nothing at all. Why do we need to lift weight and to walk by standing on the same place? Because otherwise we lose those capacities. The muscles get lost, and also the body stops to function well. It's use it or lose it. In the countryside, where people work in the fields, are there gyms? I don't think so.
Purtroppo, meno male, ma fatto sta che così è. La nostra mente
Our minds works exactly in the same way. Our mental characteristics, and also on an emotional level. But let's talk about mind as an ensemble. They have the same characteristics. Either you use it or you lose it. A classical example. Is there someone here that has never studied maths? We all have studied math.
ha preso cura della contabilità del Kunpen per anni. Oggi vivi in mezzo al bosco, però per anni ha preso cura della contabilità del Kunpen. Comunque, fatto sta che quanti di noi oggi
So, how many here among us are able to do calculations just as when we were at school? Sometimes in Abbagnano for some works at the center, it happened to me to be together with an engineer, and we open Excel, we put some data, and then we say, okay, let's try to do it without Excel. 1 on 10, we get it right.
Fabrizio magari è gentile con me e sbaglia.
Fabrizio maybe is nice with me and he gives the wrong results on purpose so that I feel better. But the majority of us are not able to do mental calculations. We learned to do them, but we have stopped. The capacity of memorizing, it's worsened. Once you used to know phone numbers by head. So what happens is that we got to a point, and this quite worries me, and this is not something that I'm seeing around. We, with technology, in the same way that we found ways to not do physical fatigues, and then eventually we had to build gyms, we are finding ways to not do mental fatigues. I make a personal example. I am able to translate from Tibetan quite well. It happened to me a while ago that I was asked to translate a text quite short, like 8 verses of 4 rows of prayer of a master, and they were quite in a rush for that, and I didn't really have a lot of time because I wanted to do it slowly, and
però avevo un impegno di farlo e volevo
but I had a commitment to do it, and I had short times, and I said, okay, let's try. I went to ask their artificial intelligence, and it was like 98% right. I had to correct like 2 or 3 things, but translating from Tibetan, like a Dharma text, to English, then it was pretty amazing. And then I sent it to them, and I said, okay, I didn't do it, but this artificial intelligence. But the point is that it was quite well. Next time that I need a translation, it happened to me. I came back from India. A certain ceremony was needed, and that I needed to send to my father. I take the Tibetan text. It was a long text. What do? I put it in a spreadsheet in Google Docs, and on the next to it I put the command for the artificial intelligence to translate it. In 1 hour I did it. Well, and it's not like I really did it, but the few times that I used this tool to translate, then the trust that I had in myself to translate really decreased a lot, and it just happened so fast. And so if I have to translate again, then I need to go take the dictionary and everything. No, it's just easier to then ask that tool to translate for me. From a certain point you can say there is no problem, but as long as I'm not able to not translate or not to make calculations or to remember phone numbers, it's one thing. But if I start to lose the ability to research, the ability to analysis, of judgment, how can I take choices in my life? Will I have the virtual assistant? Look, all my life, what should I do in this moment? Quite likely, it's a vision, it's a dystopic vision, real, possible. But what worries me more than that. It's not artificial intelligence, whether it will take jobs or decisions for us. That's another aspect, that it's less dangerous, less important. I'm not one that is scared by technology. I like technology. What worries me is what is the impact on human psyche when some things are not done anymore. We don't use mind anymore in a certain way. What happens there if I lose my capacity of research, of judgment, analysis, or I become 1,000 times more easy to manipulate. So my advice on this is, first, before we have to do something, we have to see that it's not just about doing it, but how we do it. What am I learning by doing it? What am I training myself in doing it? By doing research, there is a whole path. I remember when I used to study, I would open 10, 15 books all together, and I will go to find this or there. And maybe I will start with a question, and to get to the answer, it would take me 3 hours. But then in the middle, I will learn many other things. And there will be many things coming together, and I will have like a global vision of that argument. Today we are losing this capacity. And we are losing curiosity, which is also a capacity. The fact that there is less capacity of analysis, of research, less comprehension of things, ends up with also harming our intuition. And here there is a sentence that I've heard recently that I really liked, that says, we have a sacred gift, which is intuition, and a servant, a faithful servant, that is reason. We have built a society that gives value to the servant and which neglects the gift. This is a sentence from Albert Einstein. That is, we give more and more importance to reason and less to intuition. But in order to maintain intuition, which is one of the most important qualities that we have, we need to have less internal dialogue, more space, more silence, more knowledge. We need to be able to go deep on things, because intuition also comes from having the silence and creating a space where you relate many things together. And so particular attention in using these tools to our own service.
Okay. Costi quel che costi.
Whatever it costs. Because recently I talk about this with other people, and what it came up, yes, ethically it's right to not use certain tools, but practically we need them. It's like to say, in my job, to be awake and to do well what I do, I take cocaine. Yeah. You see me awake, right? The fact that one uses cocaine, it doesn't mean that. I make an example. A doctor that is like on an emergency shift in a doctor. A friend of mine sometimes needs to do shifts of 48 hours. That happens, unfortunately. In Italy it's not allowed, I think, but in the south of Spain, yes. But even 24 hours. I've been there 18 hours to save people's life, and I come to the end of this that I am really extremely tired and I have to do an emergency surgery. if there is a substance that in that moment wakes up the sense substance, the doctor is able to do surgery well, could we say that it's a good use of the drug? I would say yes. But does this mean that there won't be side effects of the drug, of the addiction that it creates and all the problems that it creates? Absolutely no. The real problem in this case were not the collateral effects, was the system that it's not healthy, that allows doctor to get to that state. I'm convinced that some tools that we use today, other than the contact that we put in them, the dynamic is unhealthy. I don't know if this is clear. So it's not about about the fact that I see some nice things, but that by doing that I am in a state of addiction, and I feed that addiction by creating a state of anxiety, of disconnection, and so on. And so I invite you to this challenge, because it's a real challenge of saying, I won't use the technological tools, the screen, to say, if not for something that I need.
Ci siamo?
Are we there? Silence.
Io direi di fare la sfida per una settimana.
So I would say to take this challenge for a week, because there is an important thing in the challenge. We can also try for one day, but there is the phase of abstinence, of the crisis of abstinence, that when we get into that and one is able to transcend the abstinence, then you reach a state of well-being. If you don't allow that step, then it gets even worse. I don't know if this is clear. So I invite you to try this. In general, I try to not get into personal arguments, but things more about philosophy, spiritual practice. But I see that the lifestyles that we have that are connected with all of this, that are taking us to a state of unhealthiness. And here we need to act. And what I realized is that by talking with other people prepared in many ways, I saw how much, at least apparently to me, nobody was understanding what I was saying. Because when I was talking about social media and I sent a communication about why the Kunpen Lama Gangchen went out of social media, and even someone said, how did you dare to say that this media exists as something as intrinsically bad? I say that it's intrinsically bad because it doesn't depend by the context, the content, but by the mode. Because whether I am there looking at the tanka of Buddha or looking at poppies jumping or whatever else, the mode creates addiction and the anxiety in exactly the same way. I was talking with an abbot of a very important monastery in India with 1,500 monks, and he said that the way people study really got worse in an incredible way, because most of the monks and the students are going through all the spiritual practices and studies, teachings, but from one session to the other they spend their time on the phone. So let's look at ourselves, but also let's look at others, look to see ourselves better. And unfortunately, these are dynamics that the more are maintained, and the more also is difficult to get out of them. And so I invite you to do something else also, to imagine what old person do you want to be? Do you want to become? Yesterday I was shocked towards a scene. I didn't really know how to react. I went to fix my glasses. I I was in front of this shop. I I I needed to take some sunglasses, and I went outside and to see how they look. And I almost hit like an old lady. She was like with a steak all curved, and I almost hit her, and I she had like a phone with a game in her hand. It was like a game of those that you need to hit like really quickly to shoot or whatever. And she was there like that. And I went back into the shop, and I found the glasses that I needed, and it took like a long time. I go back out, and she was still there, like that. And so I ask, I invite you to ask yourselves the question, and with that, I don't want to judge that woman, old woman, but how do you want to become when you get old? Do I want to be serene, emotionally balanced, joyous, satisfied? Or do I want to be an old man with a lot of anxiety, insecurities, chronic diseases coming from stress, chronic stress, and so on? What kind of old man do I want to become? And let's try to allow ourselves to picture like a beautiful old man. Me, when I will be an old man, I would like to be just as my grandpa. When he was 100, still he had like his own all teeth, and he would be doing exercise, and he would always be happy until the last day. I would like to be like him. I would like to be like an old man that is balanced, joyous, that is well with himself, that doesn't have problems with being on his own, that doesn't have addiction of constantly needing something, that has more also of an emotional autonomy. An old man that is in peace with the past and in harmony with the image of himself in the future. In order to be that old man, what do I need to do now? Starting from now. So we need to know the disease. We need to abandon the causes. We need to obtain the state of health. We need to believe in it. I can have a state of mental and physical balance. It's possible. It's possible to have a state of mental satisfaction, concentration when one is master of himself and one is able to love and to be loved, when one is in harmony with all the problems of life. But do I want it or not? If I want it, then I need to sweat. I need to do some effort, because the path is beautiful, but it's difficult. But it's tiring to not eat much sugar, to give up coffee, or to listen to the other, or to do this and that. Yes, it's tiring, but it's much more tiring the effects of not doing all of this, because the problems that would have serious problems of digestion, or the heart, or that I would have the tumor, which are the consequences of chronic inflammation and all of that, then that's very tiring. And so in Tibetan there is a way of saying, if you wake up, if you get up, you hit the head. If you go down, you hit your butt. So you need to choose among the two. So in the sense that there isn't an easy solution in life. There isn't a solution where everything is already done, and you don't need to do some effort.
Le abitudini condivise da altri.
And so walking against the current is tiring, and it's not only against our own habits, but also of the others. And I'm not here to point a finger against anyone, but we just have to choose how we want to live. And when we choose that we want to live a sane life, and we are able to implement this choice and to live this life that goes towards physical, mental, and environmentally also sane life, that's the best investment that we can make for society in general. Because the power that we have to transform society, we find it in ourselves, in how we live, in what we are. That's the biggest power that we have. And so I seriously invite you to reflect on these things. Because, you know, today we are here. There won't be many occasions from here to the end of the year. So yes, myself, what is the argument that is the most important now? I could talk about bodhicitta, a correct view of reality. I could talk about the state of generation, of completion of tantra. I could give you commentaries on mantra, meanings of practices. There are many beautiful things. But first of all, we need to have a solid base and to take care of that. Because when we really take care of that, then all the rest comes easy. Because now we don't have the lack of opportunity and information. We have the opposite problem, and when we are not able to digest it. And so for this, it's a very sincere invite that I make to you, a request, an invite to observe and see what is the disease, what are the causes that need to be abandoned, what is the state of health that I want to reach, and what is the path that I need to take to get to that state of health. But to start, let's try to start with the first two steps, to recognize that we are ill and to abandon the causes of the illness. Not get into the depression of, oh, I am ill, but by thinking. That's why important that to believe in the state of health that we can reach it. And something that in all of this becomes fundamental, it's not to fear to be tired and to do effort. Because it doesn't come for free. We need to get out of the comfort zone, yes. And so it's for any of you, any of us, for me. I don't want to say that it's by suffering, through suffering, that we grow in the spiritual path. Sometimes I've heard, with all that I've suffered, if I don't get enlightened, since when does suffering gets to spiritual growth? If it was for that, then all the world would be already perfectly enlightened. It's not about sacrifice that you need to suffer to grow spiritually. It's the sense that by walking against the current of one's own habits, it's tiring. But it's joyous because we walk towards the light, towards health, sanity, and also to maintain mental sanity in a world of crazy people. It's difficult to maintain coherence towards peace in a moment of hate, in a context of a lot of hate. It's difficult. But we are here for this, to allow ourselves to reflect and to use this capacity that we have of freedom of choice. And try to not go too much around it. Just to conclude, I definitely not about of the pro conspiration theories like someone is manipulating me. I'm not going into those directions personally. But for me, it's about the fact of seeing what it's not working and how can I change it. And the reason for which we have talked about all that we have talked today is that what happens in me and around me also happens on a much larger scale. And the consequences that we are already seeing today in the younger generations are not small. I make one small example before concluding from on a working perspective. I was talking with two friends. One of them has an enterprise in Brazil. Many people working, a nice enterprise. He is paying people more than in general on the market. And people, as they work, they can do like 1 hour of meditation during the work schedule. Many beautiful things. Even salaries is paying more. And another, there is a director of a big company. And they both say the same thing. The generation that is coming now, from 18 to 25, they have a resilience much inferior towards problems and effort, and a capacity of commitment to a common cause in work much less. And these are symptoms. And so the only way, it's useless to point the finger, look at these generations. We need to work on ourselves to have a good influence on the others. There isn't an alternative. Because we are going in the same direction, simply because who has grown in a certain context that is more evident. But the problem of addiction and all that comes with it, we all have it. And so, because of this, I really beg you to make this reflection, and with joy, because for me, if I'm walking towards a direction brought by the strong current, and I realize that is hurting me and the others, and I'm able to turn against the other side and see the light at the end and walk slowly, then that gives me joy. And that's what I invite you to do. Now let's do our dedications, and then I've brought a small present for each one of you. I hope it's enough, because there are many people today. If it's not enough, then I assure that I will give you something else. I have been with an important master, it's the Panchen Lama, and this is a protection that comes from him for each one of you. So I thank you, all of you, for your presence, for being here with an attentive mind and an open heart, and not just for being here tonight, but for walking together with all effects again, and to have the strength to walk against the current and to walk together so that we give ourselves more strength. Now let's do the final dedications. Lo san tempe dreme sasumge drove
mun sel takto ne gyur chi kewa kunto yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yunten rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyur tob sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan dele kshin ninsen takto kuncho sumki chingi lobo kuncho sumki ngodrubu sol kuncho sumki trashisho all'alba o al tramonto.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you, everyone.